Hello and welcome back to Too Many Books. My name is Sean, and today I'd like to talk to you about Blood Slaves by Markus Redmond. It's the first in a planned trilogy, but I suppose you don't really need to read the sequels. So this does kind of work as its own standalone title here. It's a concept of what if there was a slave rebellion in colonial America, but it involved vampires, which is a pretty interesting concept. You know, it's pretty interesting. Although the execution might be a little flawed, per se. I am going to keep this review spoiler-free for the first half, at least. I do have some spoiler aspects that I would like to talk about, but I'm going to save those all the way to the tail end. So if you're looking for just a spoiler-free book review, you can watch the first half. I'll give you plenty of warning before we get into spoiler territory. But this edition that I'm showcasing here is the Twisted Retreat edition. I'll talk more about those details in a little bit with the video. But anyways, let's dive in. We start off Blood Slaves with starting as any slavery narrative is going to start, in Africa. Well, technically it starts with a whole bunch of trigger warnings, and then it starts with an introduction by Markus Redmond talking about his inspiration for this novel. He wanted to write a novel about vampires, and then in the wake of George Floyd's murder, he ended up retooling that vampire narrative to take place in a colonial American plantation around 1710. The novel itself actually starts in Africa in 1407, kind of giving you a quick brief details of the Ramanga, which are the African vampires that are going to have their day. In particular, one of them by the name of Rafazi. It's discovered in 1407 that the bubonic plague, I presume it's the bubonic plague, some sort of plague, is transmutable from blood to vampires. So it's not great for the vampires and Rafazi. He has decided to give up drinking human blood because he doesn't want to get the plague. And he becomes a little bit weakened by not drinking human blood to the point where he gets, he gets captured in chains and sent off to America. Flash forward to 1710, and the actual narrative begins. We're not going to actually start with Rafazi here. We start with Willie. Willie is a slave working on this plantation in Carolina. He's got a wife who, I don't even know if they're actually married. He's got a partner, and soon discovers that she is with child. So he wants, try to make the best of his life here. Unfortunately, he has a pretty tough time of the matter because there is one overseer in particular who really hates Willie's guts. And Willie has to spend some time doing some other tasks on the plantation, and by doing these other tasks, he crosses paths with Rafazi from that very first chapter. He finds out what Rafazi is and decides that he can use Rafazi's powers. He can use this vampirism to try and get a better life for him and the other slaves on this plantation, to try to free them of their shackles. It's a very interesting concept. By that description alone, you're probably thinking kind of like 80s cheese, kind of an exploitation film. Maybe you're thinking like Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained with those vampire elements of From Dusk Till Dawn. It would have been spectacular like that. But what you get instead is Markus Redmond kind of playing everything straight. Like, if this was like over the top, tongue-in-cheek, not like tongue-in-cheek like it's humorous, but it kind of leans into the like 80s cheese aspect of like vampires slaughtering everybody, then it would be one thing. But, as he mentioned in his introduction, this is based in some part, or inspired in some part, by George Floyd's murder, which is a pretty heavy subject. And because of that, most of the contents of this novel is pretty heavy. You're going to get a lot of rape and a lot of beatings. It's a slave narrative. You're going to get beatings, unfortunately, without, without it being sanitized to, like, Song of the South version. But, it got to the point where it almost detracts from the vampire aspect. It's just like, man, we want more vampires in this. Like, I've had enough of the rape. I've had enough of the beatings. Like, I've had enough of the torture. Like, the vampire aspect is there, but it's just, like, it's a very slow build. It's pretty early on that Willie joins forces with Rafazi, but instead of, jump into it, he spends like a good third of the novel doing like a training montage. You know, like that scene from Batman Begins where Bruce Wayne's doing the training montage with the League of Shadows? It literally is that, but like, you know, learning to use his vampiric ways. And I mean, yeah, things are eventually going to take a turn, but it almost felt a little too late for the narrative as a whole. Like, you know, it leans just so hard into just, like I said, rape and torture and beatings that it just, it almost forgot that it was a vampire tale. It's as sad as it is to say. I mean, you do get a kind of a good old bloody free-for-all in the final chapters. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of a little too late in my opinion, but it does all right. It's there are some interesting concepts that are put forth by this narrative, but there are also some really stupid concepts that are put forth by this novel. But I'll get more of those into the slight spoiler territory. Quick break here to talk about this edition. I believe this might be the first hardcover edition. I mean, you can buy it wherever books are sold. This is the hardcover edition from Twisted Retreat, which has a nice little information card here. It includes a new dust jacket and gloss by Cheshire Lynx. Beautiful hardcover design by Benediktus Budi, who did the cover art here. Cover art is phenomenal, by the way. Stenciled edges by Verónica González, and end papers by Missy Oz. End papers are all right. I mean, I've received quite a few of these Twisted Retreat titles over the past year or so, and this is probably the best as far as design goes, apart from having the really small text on the end. But anywho, that is going to be the end of the spoiler-free section. So if you are signing off here, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. I do at least one book review a week with plenty of unboxings, including a monthly Twisted Retreat unboxing. But anywho, if you don't mind sticking around for some spoilers and some of my thoughts on that, then, well, let's begin. First of all, let's talk about Rafazi. Rafazi is the single worst vampire that has ever been relayed or portrayed in any form of vampire media. I mean, yeah, Rafazi, I mean, what? I mean, I get it. You bring on this concept of not wanting to become a plague victim by drinking blood, but Rafazi gives up drinking human blood for hundreds of years, gets put into slavery, and literally finds himself kind of staying out of the way by working in, like, the friggin' latrine. He's literally called Shit Boy. That is his slave name, is Shit Boy. You have a vampire, like, getting by on the blood of small critters and literally shoveling shit to try to, like, avoid confrontation. Like, you are the worst vampire ever. Like, he only drinks, like, human blood for the first time in hundreds of years because Willie kind of offers him his blood. Like, how pathetic are you, Rafazi? You're such an embarrassment to all vampires everywhere. Anywho, he turns Willie, and they do the whole training montage stuff. One of the aspects that is presented here with blood in Blood Slaves is that knowledge can be transferred via blood. But not like, I drink your blood and I know your PIN number now. No, even worse than that. Like, aspects like language and dialect can be transferred through blood. So, like, they're talking in, like, the Southern African-American slave vernacular. Like, you know, he's talking about, like, yes, massa, you done, every time. Like, you know, like, this Southern vernacular. And suddenly he drinks the blood of an overseer, and he starts talking like the fucking gremlin from Gremlins 2 with the glasses. Like, he literally starts talking like a white dude after. And I'm not saying, like, you know, like, white guys sound like this. They the slaves in this narrative sound like that. That's literally how they describe it in this. Like, he's like, why do I suddenly sound like a white dude? Because, like, he drinks the blood of one of the overseers, and, like, suddenly he has that overseer's grasp of grammar? That feels racist. It feels so problematic. like I say, if this was like 80s cheese, like you could almost lean into it, like almost like a Mel Brooks skit in a way. Like you could have one of the slaves, like, you know, be like massa massa, and he drinks the blood, and he comes away and he's like, my thirst is quenched. Like that's almost what it seems like with this blood drinking stuff. Anywho, one of the aspects that is put forward that is really done with blood is that you can sense when someone loves you or someone hates you through their blood. So Willie, his partner, the soon-to-be mother of his child, loves Willie, and therefore her blood is like super blood to him because she loves him. Meanwhile, that overseer that hates his guts, his blood is literally poisonous. His blood could hurt or damage Willie because of his hatred for Willie in particular, which is such a weird concept. Like, okay, I know you have to kind of like up the ante. You kind of have to have some sort of danger or, you know, other than like silver and whatnot for them to face up against. But that just seems so goofy in my opinion. And yeah, the actual scenes of them kind of taking over the plantation are fun enough, but it's way too late in the narrative. Yes, he does turn more slaves into vampires. They have to be willing. You know, he's not going to do it without their consent, because consent is important. But like, he turns them into vampires, and instead of just going and taking over the plantation, they decide, no, the time isn't right, because we have to stretch the page count out. So we're going to send you turned slaves back to the plantation and just pretend that you're not vampires. Like, you know, go back to working in the house and being a house slave. Just don't raise suspicion of the fact that you're a vampire now. Like, I guess daylight doesn't affect them. I mean, it implies, like, yeah, you got to avoid daylight. But, presumably, at some point, being a house slave or being sent back to the plantation, I'm sure some of these guys are working in the fields. You're going to encounter daylight. But, like, they just glance over that. They're like, sure, you know, it's not time yet. We can't raise suspicions that we're about to destroy this plantation. And I mentioned earlier that there's this whole, like, montage of Willie learning how to use his powers. All the people he turned, you know, no training montage for them. They're just fine. They're vampires through and through. They immediately know what's going on. Maybe they transferred the knowledge to them through the blood. I don't know. It's, like I said, it's an interesting concept. It would have been really interesting if they had kind of combined, like, Django Unchained with, you know, like I said, From Dusk Till Dawn. But you play it so serious and so safe that it's almost a chore to read. You know, it takes itself so seriously, but it's such, and yeah, there are such serious topics. Slavery is a very serious topic, but like the idea of vampires, you know, possibly taking over the plantation, it just, you know, you gotta lean into that, and instead you didn't. And it ends up becoming clunkier because of that. It ends up becoming more of a chore because of that. There is, as I mentioned, a little stinger at the end in order to kind of entice you to read the sequel. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's like an ultra spoiler. You know, I'm going to tell you how it ends. But yeah, I mean, Blood Slaves, if you're really dying to read slaves meet vampires, by all means. But honestly, I feel like it could have been done better. So if you do not want to stick around, if you do not want to know how the book ends, then by all means sign off here. Thank you very much for watching. But if you do want to stick around, let's talk about that stinger. So anyways, they're attacking the plantation. I mean, yeah, you know, it turns into a bloodbath. One of the kids of one of the white folks in the plantation accidentally ingests vampire blood. Like, it gets, like, splashed on him or something. I can't even remember. But anyways, this kid ingests the blood, and Willie makes the sensible choice of, we need to make sure this person doesn't get killed, because, you know, this kid will come back as a vampire. We don't want a white vampire. That'd be nuts. Everyone else, by the way, turns into a vampire pretty damn quickly. They're getting killed. Like, when the slaves willingly get turned, you know, they drink the blood, they get killed. It seems almost instantaneous. It's pretty damn quick. They come back as vampires. Needless to say, this kid does get killed. And they just sort of drop that. Like, Willie clearly knows this kid's going to come back as a vampire, but like he doesn't seem too concerned. I mean, he's more concerned with, saving all his friends and his family from the burning house, whatever. But anywho, they take over the plantation with some Native Americans. Native Americans are watching the borders during the day. Vampires are watching it at night. They're all singing Kumbaya. They're going to, I guess, be hi-hoing into the sequel. Then you get your stinger, where the mother of that white kid that is going to become a vampire is visiting the grave of her kid, saying like a boo-hoo and all and what have you. And as you can expect, in the most stereotypical way, as she's going over the grave, the hand of the child busts through the grave, and the kid crawls their way out of the grave, and they're like, hey, I'm a vampire now. Boom, dun, dun, dun. There's your sequel. And all I'm thinking is, like, all these other vampires turned pretty quick. You killed them, they're back up as a vampire. How much time has passed for this kid who got killed pretty early on in this plantation takeover? They knew that this kid is going to turn a vampire, gave the body back to the white folks. The white folks had a Christian burial, and now sometime after that Christian burial, the mom is revisiting the grave, and now the kid is bursting forth as a vampire? It just... I mean, yeah, you're supposed to suspend a suspension of your disbelief here with any sort of fantasy or horror and what have you. But like, that's a pretty big suspension for me. Was this kid just chilling in the coffin, waiting for this moment to bust back out as a vampire? Like, now you're building it up to be like white vampires versus like freed slave vampires. I guess, I don't know. It's the stinger to bring you in for the sequel, but it just feels so goofy. That's the level. If the whole thing was goofy, I could understand it. But like, that's the only goofy aspect in an otherwise serious narrative that is inspired by George Floyd's murder. I'm not feeling that. Speaking of the George Floyd thing, there's literally a slave here who is almost killed in the way George Floyd is. Like the overseer is like pressing down on the slave's neck, and he's saying, "I can't breathe." And I'm like, I get the parable here, but like, that's the level of seriousness in your vampire novel, and then you expect me to be like, oh, edge of my seat for the ending? Like, no. You gotta pick a lane there. But anyways, Blood Slaves, beautiful artwork in this edition, great idea, great concept, but could have definitely been executed in a much better way. If you stuck around all the way to the end, thank you very much for watching. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to subscribe to the channel here. And if you so desire, check out Blood Slaves from Markus Redmond, and we'll see you around next time.